Then why CNN constantly like Russia this, Russia that?
Because it's ratings.
Because ratings?
Our ratings are incredible right now.
But honestly, you think the whole Russia shit is just like bullshit?
Could be bullshit. I mean, it's mostly bullshit right now. Like, we don't have any big giant proof. I just feel like they don't really have it, but they want to keep digging.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the president is probably right to say, like, look, you are witch hunting me. Like, you have no smoking gun, you have no real proof.
And the CEO of CNN said in our internal meeting, he said, good job everybody covering the climate accord, but we're done with it, let's get back to Russia.
Then why CNN constantly like Russia this, Russia that?
Because it's ratings.
But honestly, you think the whole Russia shit is just like bullshit?
It's mostly bullshit right now. Like, we don't have any...
There's no serious person out there who would suggest somehow that you could even rig America's elections. In part because they're so decentralized and the numbers of votes involved. There's no evidence that that has happened in the past or that there are instances in which that will happen this time.
Well, Democrats continuing their personal attacks on President Trump this weekend, calling into question his knowledge of the civil rights movement. Watch.
I think the person we have in Washington today is uncaring, know very, very little about the struggle and the history of the civil rights movement.
Well, here to weigh in, the niece of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Fox News contributor Dr. Alveda King. Dr. King, great to see you this morning. Just on the face, listening to what he had to say. David Axelrod the other day in an interview with Representative had this to say and pushed back on this whole George Wallace comparison. I want to play this and get your take on it.
What about the president and his actions suggest to you that he is in that tradition, the tradition of a famed, notorious segregationist?
Well, I think this president right now is asking for the records, the voter registration records of people all over America. That is a form of intimidation. That's a form of harassment.
Dr. King, your thoughts?
Well, first I'd like to say that the president, of course, is leading the charge for civil rights today for the little unborn persons in the womb who have a right to live. I'm director of civil rights for the unborn, and I say that everybody's civil rights count, from the womb to the tomb, the young, the old, the sick, the elderly, the babies in the womb, and everything. And so the president is certainly fighting for civil rights today, and he has surrounded himself with African-American leaders and everyone that is supporting. We don't have to defend the president. I believe President Trump might agree that we are defending America. He's leading the charge and we're supporting him. Now, at the African American Museum, for example, he was knowledgeable of much of the history of African Americans, and when we stopped and we looked at some of the displays, the little slave manacles and things, he said, this is terrible. You can't do that to people. And so President Trump is surrounding himself with knowledgeable people. President Trump himself is a very brilliant man. I believe he's compassionate. If you go and look at all of the executive orders, the things for women in science, for African American education, for moving...
There's no serious person out there who would suggest somehow that you could even rig America's elections. In part because they're so decentralized and the numbers of votes involved. There's no evidence that that has happened in the past or that there are instances in which that will happen this time.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. This is the NoSpinNewsSource.com monthly report for August 2017, a very special edition. And I am your host today, Kari Ilonummi. And thank you once again for joining us. Now, we'll be discussing a whole lot of hot topic items. That's for sure. Some of these items is going to be very difficult for many of you to believe, but that's pretty commonality with many of the things I've said over the years, and unlike most folks in politics, I'm still here shining bright. So, here we go today. Now, starting out the show, as you notice, what better people to have than the niece of Dr. Martin Luther King, and with what would be Obama, former president himself, stating that there is no such things as what would be those fraudulent election results, or the ability for another nation or whatnot entity to hack or steal the elections. So it's funny because you got to see the one side of Obama, and then you got to see him say something else entirely different. There is the proof. Not much more to say. So before we continue though, why don't we check out what would be this next video of what would be Prosecutor Larry Klayman discusses the Special Prosecutor Robert Mueller's investigation witch hunt into President Donald Trump. And we'll catch you right back after this break.
The president tweeted on Friday, after I got fired, that I better hope there's not tapes. I woke up in the middle of the night on Monday night, because it didn't dawn on me originally, that there might be corroboration for our conversation. There might be a tape. And my judgment was I needed to get that out into the public square. And so I asked a friend of mine to share the content of the memo with a reporter. Didn't do it myself for a variety of reasons, but I asked him to because I thought that might prompt the appointment of a special counsel.
I thought Comey really made a fool out of himself today. I mean, I think it's clear now that, there's on a few facts. Number one, the president was not under investigation.
Right, absolutely.
Without question. Number two, he was eager to see if any of his cohorts, or we should call them satellites, were, and he asked to be notified of that.
Mm-hmm.
So, this whole Russian thing is just basically a bunch of BS.
Well, very interesting to remember what transpired last Thursday. The testimony of former FBI director, fired FBI director Jim Comey, admitting to going to a friend to have a story leaked with the hopes that it would bring about the appointment of an independent counsel. And then former FBI assistant director James Kallstrom appearing on the Fox Business Network with not too many kind things to say about former Director Comey. Now, to put this all in perspective for us and take a look ahead to the testimony we'll hear this afternoon in front of the Senate Intelligence Committee, we welcome in a gentleman known for fighting for individual liberty and freedom, the founder of Judicial Watch and now at Freedom Watch, so famous, or perhaps in the mindset of the left. Remember their televised fantasy on NBC for so many years, The West Wing? I understand a character was created in the image of our next guest. From Newsmax Washington, we welcome in Larry Klayman of Freedom Watch. Larry, it's so good to have you with us again. And I just got to ask you, you were in the room for the testimony last week from Comey. What were your impressions of that entire episode?
Well, it was a charade. It was a dog and pony show. First of all, the Republican establishment, I admire you too, JD, because you've always fought against that establishment. You're your own man when you were congressman and now. But that Republican establishment, run by Chairman Richard Burr of that committee, basically rolled over to the minority. Senator Mark Warner of Virginia, the minority ranking member, and he allowed in the opening statement to trash the President of the United States and to accuse him of all kinds of illegalities. So you can see where it was going. And they brought Comey forward, dog and pony show, to try to destroy the president, because the reality here is, in my view, is that the Republican establishment wants to get rid of Trump, and they probably would like to get rid of Pence in the process too, the vice president, so they can run their establishment candidate in 2020. And then you have, on the left, you've got these Democrats who have lost all sense of honesty or truth, and Comey assisted them. But with regard to the clip and regard to these documents, nobody's asked the question whether they're true or not. They just accepted it as true, both sides, Republicans and Democrats on that committee. And they didn't get behind it. Why didn't they ask, when did you create these documents? Do you have a laptop? Would you please turn over your laptop so we can take a look at how you actually created them? Because I believe they were made as a justification in revenge for Comey's firing. And if you looked at him at that hearing, he literally was almost foaming at the mouth with hatred for the president, because he's an establishment creature in Washington. He doesn't like to be embarrassed. He doesn't like to lose his job. And he should have lost his job. And let me tell you something else, JD, quickly, is that we filed a lawsuit against Comey shortly before that hearing. I was seeking to serve him with that lawsuit, with a summons. I had a process server with me, and I asked politely to the head of security of the Senate Intel Committee if we could simply deliver it to him, because these people vanish. They try to evade service of process after the fact. And this lawsuit is by Dennis Montgomery, a whistleblower who came forward to Comey with 47 hard drives, over 600 million pages of information showing surveillance on President Trump when he was a businessman, surveillance on the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, other justices, 156 judges, yours truly, because I've been opposing these people for years. Anybody who challenged them were being subject to this illegal criminal surveillance. And Comey sat on this for over 2 years. We gave him all the documents. My client Montgomery got immunity. He buried it because now we find out, with certain press reports in the last few weeks, that the FBI was engaged in illegal surveillance along with the intelligence agencies. And I've tried to get these intelligence agencies to investigate it, to bring Montgomery in front. This should be the issue, the leaks, the surveillance. They don't want to do that because they've known about it in all likelihood, and they don't want to challenge these intelligence agencies, these committees on Capitol Hill, because stuff about their private lives, stuff about their professional lives will likely come out to destroy their lives and career. I call it the Anthony Weiner factor, is that there's some stuff lurking there that they don't want to expose. So they're not doing the bidding of the American people. They're doing their own political bidding. And that's the tragedy here.
Pardon me, I don't know, I must be allergic to hear about that kind of surveillance. Not to joke, but it's a serious matter, but it just prompted a sneeze from me. Today, more than a sneeze from the Attorney General of the United States, who will sit before that same Senate Intelligence Committee at 2:30 Eastern Time. Over on the Fox News Channel, Judge Andrew Napolitano yesterday was saying, wait a minute, Mr. Attorney General, you don't want to go testify. Here is the case made by Judge Napolitano. Let's listen to it, then we'll get you to evaluate it.
This is a very dangerous position for him to be in. He is not testifying as the chief law enforcement officer in the land, as the Attorney General. He's testifying as a witness because he doesn't run the Russia investigations, any of them. He is a witness. He has involvement in both. He's going to be accused of perjury. He's going to come to a conflict point where he has to decide, am I here to defend the President of the United States or here to defend myself? That's an awful position for him to be in.
So is that a suggestion that he should not testify?
If I were his lawyer, and presumably he has kept counsel with some lawyer, either in the DOJ or outside attorney, I would advise, do not put yourself in this position. It is a no-win situation.
Hey, Larry, I hear that, and granted, for purposes of full disclosure, I am not a lawyer, never played one on TV, but as a member of Congress, even though you put witnesses under oath, it is not a judicial proceeding. It is a political inquiry, and it seems to me that that General Sessions can come in and say, well, wait a minute, before we go anywhere else, I got to tell you about Jim Comey, who failed to report to me as a subordinate all these goings on. In other words, it seems to me, understanding the congressional process, that former Senator Sessions, now the Attorney General, can use this hearing to, in essence, clear his name and that of the President. Am I misinterpreting something here?
No, I agree with you, JD. I do. Technically speaking, Judge Napolitano is right, but that's not the way it works on Capitol Hill. They don't hold anybody account for perjury. Eric Holder, I was on an airplane yesterday, I saw Holder. We traded some barbs with each other in a good-natured way. I mean, here's a guy who lied in front of Congress, never was held accountable. You've got James Clapper, the Director of National Intelligence, who lied about mass surveillance. He said it wasn't happening, not held accountable. The Democrats are going to accuse you of lying in any event. And I admire Sessions for doing this because he has to do it. And he's a fine man. I met him as a young lawyer in Mobile, Alabama when he was U.S. Attorney. I've encountered him throughout my career. He's a man of great integrity. I honestly believe that, and I don't say that about everybody. So he'll handle himself up there. He knows what to do. He's a good lawyer. And he's got to get out there, and he's got to clear the air. And I don't believe that he will lie under oath. And if they want to make that point, I'll frankly be there to defend him. Because, frankly, it's out of control. These Democrats want to destroy the presidency. They want to bring down the country. when was the last time a leftist was concerned about Russia? Okay, and that's what these people are. Russia's like their Mecca. It's the equivalent of their Mecca. I mean, Bernie Sanders honeymooned in Moscow. He could do a Hollywood movie, honeymoon in Moscow, and play the part. And so consequently, this is all a manipulation to bring down the presidency, and somebody's got to fearlessly come forward, and Sessions is doing that. He won't be found to have perjured himself, but he's doing the right thing, so I agree with you.
Well, let me come back to something else that is in the news this morning, and you lamented, as do I, the almost spinelessness of the Republican establishment on Capitol Hill and elsewhere there on the swamp. Now the bells have been ringing with an AP alert. Speaker Paul Ryan comes out saying this morning, quote, "Let Robert Mueller do his job." Now, for better or worse, the former FBI director, and apparently, if we're to believe what we hear, good pal of James Comey, is the independent counsel. And boy, all the establishment Republicans are falling into line. Newt Gingrich sounded a cautionary note over the weekend. And of course, there's this obligatory chorus of hosannas for Judge Mueller, whom I'd see him on the elevator when he'd be over on the Hill doing his business. He seemed to be a fairly good guy, but there are questions about this entire independent counsel. Your take both on the Ryan pronouncement this morning and, if you will, the real Robert Mueller.
Well, I'll give you the real Robert Mueller first, okay? The real Robert Mueller, FBI director, covered up an investigation of Saudi money laundering. I had two FBI special agents I represented, Robert Wright and John Vincent. One ultimately came to work for me at Judicial Watch. He ran the Chicago office at the time, John Vincent. Robert Wright tried to expose the fact that he was trying to investigate money laundering by someone named Marsouk leading up to 9/11. I met him before 9/11 in the office of David Shippers, the House impeachment manager, who I'd gotten to know during impeachment. And he told me this. And why was it covered up by the FBI, by the higher-ups? He wasn't allowed to do an investigation. He wasn't even allowed to bring forward information that a Muslim special agent of the FBI that they asked to be wired refused to be wired in this investigation because, quote, Muslims don't rat out other Muslims. And instead of following through with that investigation, they tried to take away the security clearance of Robert Wright to drive him out of the FBI. And who was the FBI director? Mueller. Let's also remember that Mueller was the guy who sat on a lot of this illegal surveillance when he was at the FBI. So since we've got issues of leaks and everything else, he's conflicted because he himself was involved in a cover-up of the illegal surveillance that was being conducted even during the Bush years, George W. Bush. Warrantless wiretaps. I brought a case on that. So Mueller's got a lot of problems here. He should not, and he's also a close friend of Comey. It was a mistake by the Deputy Attorney General to appoint him. I don't think that he thought it through at the time. I think Rosenstein's a good man. He didn't think it through. He panicked, and they appointed Robert Mueller. Now let's talk about the traitors on Capitol Hill. I mean, this is reminiscent of Caesar and Brutus. You've got Paul Ryan, who's been two-faced, not just during the campaign, but after that. He would like to see Trump gone. He's playing the game, but he's not an honest person, and he's not loyal to, frankly, the president. Now, you've got other people up there, and you know very well about him. You ran against him, John McCain, who, frankly, I think has lost his mind. I think at this point he should retire and go live in Scottsdale. It's a beautiful place. I love Arizona. But this man just recently said that President Obama was a better leader than President Trump. I mean, this is what you've got. The Republicans are trying to stab the president in the back, the establishment. They want to destroy him. And now you've got the Democrats trying to destroy him. So he's up against everything. And he's Caesar. These people like Ryan and McCain and others are Brutus. And we, at Freedom Watch, we want to see this president succeed. I'll criticize him when necessary. I have. But this is our last chance. If President Trump does not succeed, the next president is going to be 100 times worse than Obama. And that's a reality. So, and this country will not survive. We barely escaped Hillary Clinton. We can't see this happen. So those people out there, conservatives, libertarians, others, we have to be supportive of the president.
All right, Tom Fitton and Jay Secular. All right, Greg, I'll go back to you. So the deep state selective leaking comes out fast and furious. As Tom is mentioning, there's a slow drip on Hillary information and release from the FBI information. What did you make of the grand jury footnote?
Well, look, there's such a double standard here, and every time Hillary Clinton or Democrats do something wrong, the media sort of yawns and then proceeds to ignore it. But if Donald Trump so much as hiccups, they go apoplectic and crazy over it. And the Uranium One deal, as you pointed out in your monologue, is a perfect example of that. I mean, my goodness, it is a crime, a felony, to use your public office to confer a benefit on a foreign government in exchange for money. It's called fraud and bribery. It's an emoluments clause violation, public corruption. It's also arguably racketeering to use a business as a receptacle for illegal money. I mean, all of those are crimes. And, it's about time that the Justice Department now reopen the Hillary Clinton investigation, not just into her emails, but into a pay-to-play, as you described it in your monologue.
Tom, is there anything else you could share that you've gotten from the Freedom of Information Act request that Judicial Watch has made?
Well, we just had another batch of documents, to Greg's point, that came out earlier this week of Huma Abedin emails that show the Clinton Foundation was actually talking to the State Department about ambassadorships, trying to push donors' interests with the State Department. Again, Doug Bann of the Clinton Foundation through Huma Abedin. Another email shows that Huma Abedin sent classified information to herself on her Clinton email server account. So this is now, again, more information, more classified information mishandling, more pay-to-play information, more scandal related to the Clinton Foundation, the intersection with the Clinton State Department. All of this, to me, screams of the need for the president, as president, to tell his Justice Department to take a look at how the Clinton investigations were handled or mishandled and see if they need to be reinvigorated or restarted again, given all this new information and as this FBI mishandling of the investigations where they're giving everyone immunity, looking the other way when documents and records are destroyed, and make sure that was done on the up and up, and if necessary, restart it.
Hang on. Jay, I agree with Greg. We've got to reopen these cases. That's pay-to-play. Yeah. That's bribery. This is obstruction of justice. This was to prevent congressional oversight with the mom-and-pop shop bathroom closet and the deletion of emails and this new information. What does it take to get an investigation into multiple serious felonies if your last name is in Trump or Hannity or Sekulow?
Well, I mean, here's the thing. I think you got a situation. You got to look at it right now. I mean, I think this is the reality. I mean, we left off, of course, the famous tarmac discussion between the former president of the United States, Bill Clinton, and then the then current Attorney General of the United States, Loretta Lynch. And that's all going on simultaneously when the secretary was about to be interviewed by the FBI. But here's the commonality. Who was the director of the FBI when all of this was going on? James Comey, who we now know is the leaker-in-chief in all of this. So James Comey is the commonality that was there in all of this. He's the leaker-in-chief, and he's the one who brags about that he leaked information that included conversations he had with the President of the United States to get what?
Absolutely.
A special counsel, which he got. And then ask yourself, how is that okay? And the answer is it's not.
Ukraine, Uranium One, this new information from the FBI tonight, of course, the ridiculous dossier. I want everybody under oath in investigations and stop the hyperventilating, the double standard, the breathless reporting, and ignoring real crimes. That's what I want.
And welcome back to the Monthly Report show for August 2017. Now let's get on to some discussion and whatnot here. Well, first of all, as many of you are well aware of, I met what would be Uli John Roth, the lead guitarist of the hit band The Scorpions, along with guitarist of Ozzy Osbourne, Zakk Wylde recently. I have photos here to show of that. I hope you enjoy those and whatnot. And ultimately, from there, the president has issued and created what would be a new special advisory commission on election integrity. This will help to safeguard the rule of law and democracy, in which states that it is illegal for non-U.S. citizens to vote in our elections, vote twice, or to fraudulently use dead voters' information, to be placing new or what would be additional votes. Now, of course, many people who don't like this president are calling racist. He's racist, they say. Well, it's not racist. U.S. citizens should be voting in our elections, and people who are not citizens of this nation have no damn business voting in our elections. As an American, do you think you could go down to Guadalajara, Michoacan, Mexico City? Do you think you could go down there and vote? No, you can't. So why should they be able to vote here? Fair is fair. U.S. citizens are U.S. citizens. Mexican citizens are Mexican citizens. And if a Mexican wants to become a U.S. citizen, just like my biological father, well, guess what? He was an immigrant too. But he went through the legal methods and means. That's right. From Finland. And he did it legally to come to the United States. And contributed and was a tax-paying citizen. So, there's a legal way to immigrate, and there's nothing racist about that, because, heck, if I was racist against any of those other immigrants coming here, I'd have to be racist against my own biological father, now wouldn't I? But that's not the case, obviously. So we believe in the rule of law, and that is very fundamental and important. Now, 30 out of the 50 states, and this information is probably about 3 weeks old right now, there's most likely over 30, but what would be of the states have complied thus far with this request to give over what would be voter data. The other 20 states will eventually, like it or not, you're going to have to. I expect once this commission has finished its review as well, that the American people will discover that President Donald Trump won not just the electoral but the popular vote by and large of the citizens of the United States, and that's how he became president. So I'm expecting upwards of approximately literally 5 million votes to have been fraudulently casted toward literally the DNC and specifically Hillary Rodham Clinton. So if she's claiming what would be voter fraud, she could be right, but it's not. Just like collusion, she could be right, but it's not with Donald Trump. It's actually her own team. Now, this is very difficult for many of you to accept, to believe. It's going to take some time, and some of these videos on here are going to help to provide that ample evidence and proof for you. But with that being stated, sometimes people have to have their world crushed and break down around them in order to give up their falsely conceived notions and belief systems and things. For instance, you know, I see a lot of people on both sides of the spectrum. I see liberals that want me to be liberal and put down the conservatives. I see conservatives that expect me to be conservative and put down the liberals. Well, let's get something straight, folks. We've all contributed, both sides of the line, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, honestly. So we look at the last 16 years of George W. Bush and Barack Obama administrations, things have went to hell, economically speaking. They haven't got any better. And that's given the Republicans their fair share of the due credit, or should I say blame, as well as the Democrats. And that's the thing that burns many of you people, is I don't choose necessarily a side. I don't even, if it was I ran for an independent Congress member last year because I didn't want to have to choose a party. Now next year, 18, me running for Senate and House of Representatives here in Washington State, I will be choosing a party. I'll be choosing a major political party, and there's only 2 to choose from. So we'll have to see where that goes. But anyways, but before we elaborate too much, I would like to show you John Podesta, Hillary Clinton's former head of her presidential campaign, on Fox News discussing what would be the collusion with Russia, pay to play, and a company called Uranium One. That's right, Uranium One. We'll see you right back after this break. Thank you.
This half an hour, the Russian election probe heating up in the House. Hillary Clinton's campaign chairman, John Podesta, met with a House panel probing how Russia's interference in the 2016 election earlier this week occurred. One focus of the investigation, the hacking of Podesta's own personal email account and the release of his emails by WikiLeaks during the campaign. In recent days, President Trump has accused former President Obama of doing too little to address Russian cyber activity while he was still in the White House. Joining me right now is the former chairman of Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign, John Podesta. John, thanks so much for joining us this morning. Good to have you on the program.
Good morning, Maria.
So you met with the Senate Intelligence Panel as part of this investigation. What can you tell us? House Intelligence. What can you tell us about that meeting?
Well, they wanted to know essentially what had happened to me and what the effect of was on the campaign, the Russian interference in our democratic process, and they're probing what actually happened, whether there was collusion, and what are we going to do about it. They asked me not to get into specific questions that they asked me and my specific answers, but in general terms, they're taking a bipartisan look at this stage. You know, they had trouble in that committee when their chairman, Devin Nunes, was kind of working with the White House to try to build cover sort of for whatever had happened in the Trump White House and the Trump campaign, and particularly the Mike Flynn matter. But I think they're back on track with the bipartisan investigation, so there are members from both sides, and they asked probing questions about what had happened during the campaign.
Do you find it odd that there's been so much attention on the Trump campaign and the Trump associates and potential collusion with Russians when in fact it's really the Democrats who have deeper and stronger ties to Russia? I mean, John, I've got to ask you about your own situation, your ties to Russian entities. You joined the board of a small energy company in 2011. 2 months later, a Russian entity directly funded by the Kremlin invested $35 million in the company. You were given 75,000 shares in a Russian company, which you failed to disclose when you became an Obama associate.
Maria, that's not true. I fully disclosed and was completely compliant with, and by the way, I divested before I went into the White House.
But where did you divest it, John? A lot of people feel like you divested it to your adult children.
I divested it consistent with the advice that I was given by the White House counsel's office, and I was fully compliant and fully transparent about what I had done. And so the fact that you're picking through my emails that were stolen by the Russians and released by WikiLeaks, and creating a story which is not true, is something that we have to deal with. So you weren't given 75,000
shares of stock in a Russian company? You were not given 75,000 shares?
I didn't have any stock in any Russian company. So go back and get your facts straight, Maria.
That's not true, John. We know that you own 75,000 shares. You're on the board of Joe.
It's not a Russian company. They own less than 5%.
It's backed by the Kremlin.
I didn't own any shares in that company, Maria.
When you stepped off the board, you were given 75,000 shares from Joe Lee.
That is not true.
How many shares were you given, John?
Maria, I didn't have any shares in any Russian company. I was on the board of an American company that did business here and only here. The Russian company had a small investment in that company, and
well, it's widely reported that it's backed by the Kremlin. It's been widely reported that that company's been backed by the Kremlin, and they gave you 75,000 shares that you had to disclose.
They didn't give me anything.
Went into the Obama administration.
Maria, you can keep leveling this charge. It is not true.
Okay.
They didn't give me anything. They had a small investment in a company I was on the board of. It was a clean energy company that was trying to deal with the issue of trying to produce energy, liquid fuel, from a biotechnology process. It was based in Boston. The Russian company had a very small investment in it, and you could keep saying that they gave me stock, but they didn't. I'm just following all the widely reported information here, John. There's also Hillary Clinton, obviously. Maybe you're looking at widely reported information from InfoWars.
No, I'm not.
But it is not
No, I'm not.
true.
This is Politico. This is the New York Times. This is the Wall Street Journal.
No, it's
That's
not.
what I'm looking at.
Information from InfoWars.
No, I'm not.
And welcome back to the Monthly Report show. Now, John Podesta obviously denies that, and I'm sure people on the liberal left and many Democrats will want to believe this can't be the truth. Well, as I told Mr. Congressman Rick Larson, here of the great state of Washington, my former opponent of last year for U.S. House of Representatives, a 9-term Congress member, that's right. I don't know how he pulled that one off. But anyways, so like I told him recently, you folks had to push it. Make up stuff about Donald Trump and let it go, and now the rubber band is about to snap back with karma. So, Hillary Clinton launches her, what she calls, Resistance PAC, Political Action Committee. Governor Gary Brown, California, blasted for advocating the overthrow of the United States. Voters think that Congress should investigate Loretta Lynch ties to what would be Hillary Clinton. The Clinton probe, excuse me. And U.S. fertility rate is at an all-time low. Very interesting. So at this point in the road, it's about time to discuss attorney links to what would be the Clinton Foundation, Mayo Clinic, and others. That's right. We have some bombshell information from an attorney down in what would be Florida discussing some of the situation regarding people ending up dead around the Clintons that are key witnesses. And some of them are dying and being murdered just before they go to trial. Interesting. It's got to be a coincidence. Have you ever heard about the book called The Clinton Body Count? Well, they're going to have to revise that and make an edition number 2 before probably 2017 is up. We'll catch you right back after this break. We're going to check you out with this video, and hope you enjoy it.
The DNC fraud lawsuit continues to be ignored by the mainstream media. Meanwhile, the Clinton body count continues to grow. Now, Jared Beck is representing the plaintiffs in the DNC fraud lawsuit. We spoke to him in the past. We are now joined by his wife, also an attorney in Miami, Florida, Elizabeth Lee Beck. Elizabeth, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, Elizabeth, I wanted to get you on for a couple reasons. One, I wanted to keep the DNC fraud lawsuit in the narrative, in the talk, especially here because there's been no coverage whatsoever on mainstream media, at least that I could see. No talk about even the Bernie Sanders lawsuit. Being on the other side of this, seeing the actual inner workings, seeing what Jared's doing behind the scenes, does it shock you to see that the mainstream media is completely ignoring this?
Yeah. Do you remember Mr. Brandon Wiseman?
I'm sorry, who is that?
Mr. Brandon Wiseman. He passed away very suddenly. And when he passed away, there was some speculation that he was quite possibly connected to the DNC lawsuit. And we were contacted by many members of the public who expressed concern. But I want to go through a timeline, some connections, if I may, Owen.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, that's Barrington Wisenant. He was a federal prosecutor in Florida. He wound up dead on the beach with head trauma. And now you're talking about possible connections there.
So it's very convoluted, so you have to follow very closely, okay? Okay, number one, there is a Brandon Wiseman, J. Plotkin, Jacksonville connection. So follow me here. J. Plotkin was the director of the state attorney's office in Jacksonville from 1993 to 2009. Until January of 2009, he supervised all aspects of an office of 100 attorneys and over 300 support staff. Mr. Brandon Wiseman is actually not a Miami native, even though he worked here, and passed away in Broward County, which is in South Florida. To the contrary, Mr. Brandon Wiseman is a native of Jacksonville, Florida. He graduated from Bishop Kenny High School in 1997 and worked as an assistant state attorney with the 4th Judicial Circuit from 2004 through 2007. In other words, Mr. Brandon Wiseman and Mr. J. Plotkin worked in the state attorney's office at the same time. That's
so where does J. Plotkin come into this? Because this is a new name to me.
J. Plotkin?
Yes.
Just bear with me.
Okay.
Now, there's a Jacksonville Mayo Clinic connection. Mayo Clinic has a hospital in Jacksonville, Florida. There's a Mayo Clinic Judge Harvey Schlesinger connection. A lawsuit was filed in 2015 in federal court in Jacksonville against the Mayo Clinic in connection with an organ transplant case. The judge presiding over that case was the Honorable Harvey Schlesinger. There There's a Judge Schlesinger, J. Plotkin, Branton-Wiesnant connection. J. Plotkin is Judge Harvey Schlesinger's son-in-law. Mr. Wiesnant's body was recovered on May 24th, 2017. On June 8, 2017, Judge Schlesinger threw out the case against Mayo Clinic, Jacksonville, on summary judgment. There is a Mayo Clinic Clinton Foundation connection. A number of hospitals, including Mayo Clinic and St. Vincent's, co-sponsored a launch event in Northeast Florida in connection with the Clinton Health Matters Initiative. There is a Mayo Clinic high government officials connection. The emeritus public trustees of the Mayo Clinic include a Thomas J. Brokaw, quite possibly Tom Brokaw, a Barbara P. Bush, a Richard B. Cheney, possibly Dick Cheney, Senator Thomas A. Daschle, and Paul A. Volcker. The Mayo Clinic provides a full range of health services, including organ transplants, bone marrow transplants, blood transfusions, and genetic medicine. There is a Clinton Foundation Haiti connection. There is a Klaus Eberwein Haiti connection. Klaus Eberwein, a former Haitian government official, was found dead July 11th of this year with a gunshot wound to the head. He was found at 14501 South Dixie Highway, a Quality Inn. This Quality Inn is 7.5 miles from my office. There's a Peter Smith Mayo Clinic connection. Mr. Peter Smith purportedly took his own life May 14th in a hospital in Rochester, Minnesota, near the Mayo Clinic, called the Aspen Suites. The Aspen Suites is across the street from the St. Mary's campus of Mayo Clinic and is almost exclusively used by patients of the hospital. He purportedly left a suicide note which stated that there was no foul play whatsoever and, quote, recent bad turn in health since January 2017, end quote, was the reason that he was taking his own life, and the timing was related to, quote, to life insurance of $5 million expiring, end quote. He was purportedly searching for Clinton emails. That's my research, sir.
Wow. Elizabeth, you go on.
I'm not aware of any life insurance policy that would pay out if the person committed suicide. I believe they usually have a suicide exclusion.
Yeah, that's pretty much commonplace in any insurance policy. Wow, Elizabeth, I'm not sure how often you do interviews like this. You did great research. You were reading from our notes. From your notes. Thank you so much for breaking that down. I don't even think you understand the bombshell that you just released here. I mean, this is actually huge news. I contacted Jared because I wanted to get an update on the DNC fraud suit, and I wanted to talk about, we talk about potential witnesses testifying against the Clintons. All of a sudden, Peter Smith. All of a sudden, Klaus. All of a sudden, these deaths. So I wanted to have him on, and then you were like, "Well, I've got some new breaking news here. I've made some connections." Wow. I'm just going to try to digest everything that you just said. It sounds to
Everything
me...
I said to you is a fact. Everything I said is fact. I have
clearly laid it out.
No speculation, just facts.
So the interesting thing to me then, and allow me to speculate, if you will, this is my speculation, it seems to me the key here that I noticed was the organ transplant. An organ transplant. And that just makes me scratch my head. Why would there be a tie into an organ transplant? Is this stuff that goes on at the Mayo clinics down there?
They have an organ transplant department at Mayo Clinic, Jacksonville, yes.
I mean, you can imagine where my mind goes. You start talking about organ plants, organ donation, organ transplants, black market even perhaps. Maybe there was something there. That's, again, my speculation as to why somebody might be trying to cover something up here. That's just my speculation. But you've laid out all of the amazing connections, and then you started laying out Bush connections. You started laying out other connections down there in Florida that I didn't even think about until today. When you started doing this research and turning up this dirt, were you as shocked as I am right now?
Yes.
So what do you think the deal is? Where do you think the connection here lies? Do you think, or do you think that this is just a coincidence that now not only Barrington Wisenhunt is no longer with us, but now also Peter Smith and Klaus Eberwein, who happen to be in the States?
I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on.
I'm very emotional right now. I can honestly understand that. You know, the other day...
I'm just so wired here. I don't know what's going on.
I said on Twitter the other day when I heard about Peter Smith, I think that was Friday, immediately I started thinking about you and Jared because you guys are really sticking your neck out there. I mean, this is no joke, and this is happening right down the street from you. This isn't just happening in a foreign land. This isn't just happening in Haiti. This isn't just happening on a boat somewhere out at sea. Now this is happening just miles from your guys' offices. I mean, you're taking a serious leap of bravery here for coming on and revealing this information that you have that you've investigated for yourself. Again, no lies, all fact. What do you want the public to know? I mean, I know it's tough for you to gather yourself right now, but just what do you think the public needs to know right now? And where does this information need to go?
I would like the public to look into these matters, perhaps. I think they bear investigation. I think deaths are a serious matter. Mr. Barrington Wisenhunt was a friend of a friend. My friend told me to stay safe, and Mr. Barrington Wisenhunt passed away.
And our first guest this evening says stealing government secrets and then mishandling them amount to crimes. So is leaking classified material. Joining us tonight is Chris Farrell. He's the Director of Investigations and Research at Judicial Watch. Chris, good to have you with us. Let's start with 7 memoranda, 4 of which contained classified information. At this point, leaking one of them, it's unclear, although the Columbia law professor says that there was no classified information in it. The fact that they were leaked in itself is a priori. Is it not a violation of federal record-keeping laws?
It absolutely is. You have a case where Mr. Comey absconded with U.S. government records. They were not his to take in the first place. Secondly, he probably is in a position, as was Mrs. Clinton, violating Title 18 of the U.S. Code, Section 793F, which is mishandling national defense information. I know this because I'm also a former special agent of Army counterintelligence, and I've done investigations precisely like the open question here. So Mr. Comey's in trouble. He essentially flaunted the fact that he broke these rules and laws in his sworn testimony in front of the Senate. It's outrageous.
And as you listen to Senator Mark Warner there in Catherine Herridge's report, he sounds like a man working very hard to try to mitigate the circumstances of this event on behalf of the former FBI director.
You know, look, the then FBI director is in a private meeting discussing certain matters with the president. That right alone, right there, stop. The nature of that relationship and the communications that occurred, just by their essence, by the fact that it occurred itself, is 99% likely to be classified. It's not something that's going to be publicly discussed or openly acknowledged in the media, except when you have somebody like Comey, who goes out and selectively leaks in order to damage the president.
Well, it's outrageous, no matter what else, the legal implications, whatever, for this man to have such grand illusions, if you will, of his himself and his prerogatives is to me extraordinary for anyone responsible for a federal law enforcement and counterintelligence agency.
And then Lou, get this, just think about it. So he goes in front of the Senate and makes this testimony. He then leaks, or had leaked, through his friend to the New York Times. We ask for the same records Judicial Watch does, and you don't know what we're told? No. And we have to sue to get them. So he can tell the Senate, he can leak it through his friend to the New York Times, but when we ask for it to explain to the American public what went on, we're told no, and we have to go into federal court to sue to get it.
And also the Senate Intelligence Committee itself has to, at the very least, I don't know if they've got them now, but ask for them and hope that apparently that the FBI director is feeling generous with his personal work product as he sees it, apparently. Not apparently, he said so, rather than a work product as of the FBI director when he was having those conversations with the President of the United States. I mean, this is extraordinary. Let me turn to Hillary Clinton in this circumstance. Why are we not hearing from a special counsel that looking into this situation of Russian collusion? Why aren't we hearing from the special counsel about her dealings with the Russians, her approvals that impact actually reserves of U.S. uranium that resulted, in fact, a transfer to a Canadian company with her approval and a speech for $500,000 by the former president, Bill Clinton? Why isn't that part of the Russian collusion investigation?
Precisely. If you're looking for collusion, look at Uranium One, the Clinton Foundation, Bill Clinton's speaking lists of the various places he ran around the world, 247 speeches netting $48 million, each of them approved by Cheryl Mills, not a single speech denied. If you want to look at collusion and foreign influence and using the Secretary of State position as an arm of or as an adjunct of the Clinton Foundation, look no further. I mean, you could spend the next...
Well, I want to look further, though, Chris.
Yes,
I want to look to John Podesta. I want to look to the Jewel Company and $35 million that they received and Podesta's connection to that enterprise. Why isn't that part of the collusion discussion or investigation?
Podesta was very cute with your colleague Maria Bartiromo when he said, well, I don't have any stock in any Russian company. Well, no, his holdings are actually in the Massachusetts incorporated U.S. affiliate of that Russian company. So, you know, Podesta likes to play it both ways. He's deeply involved with these Russian activities and companies, millions of dollars. His brother as well is involved in consulting with Russian entities. But they like to play word games, so when it parses language, it's more disgraceful behavior.
Pretty potent, isn't it? Welcome back to the Monthly Report Show. This month I'm trying to provide you with lots of evidence, video footage, along with my video, what would be commentary to discuss some of these variables. So, let's talk about the Russian collusion delusion. That is right. I think I've got a couple of notes here that I've written that I wanted to discuss. Ultimately, they're here somewhere. I just got to find them. Let's see here. Reach on over. Let's see what we got. Here we go. Okay. Ultimately, the Russia collusion delusion. 2016 elections. Isn't it interesting? Now, many of you remember, those of you that have been with me and known me for at least 2 years now, you remember 2 years ago was the Blaze the Dog incident, where individuals on the liberal left created a fake news scandal and story on me to try to take me out. That's right, politically. talk about a conspiracy. That's right. Yes, I use the C word, and it's okay because don't worry, my credibility won't fade away on the show from using the C word. I'll use it again. Conspiracy. Ooh, I must be confident now. Ultimately, they launch a conspiracy fake news story scandal against me called Blaze the Dog, where they alleged and stated that I had a dog that was being abused, skin and bone, never had human interaction, so on and so forth. And they use this to try to drive a wedge between my supporters and voters and myself, and to make me look bad the year prior to running for Congress. So, but that didn't work out very well. It came back to bite them in the ass. It made it to where they couldn't even say or do a darn thing in the middle of my campaign, and they discredited not me, but themselves in the process by ultimately manipulating and lying to many of their own friends and family members, and that came back to bite them in the butt as people discovered, wait a minute, we don't like some of Kari's politics, but we really don't like it when someone that we're supposed to believe is lying to us and manipulating us to turn against Kari. So it had a real dramatic backfire in their face. So this pertains to what would be the president. They have stated, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, and their cohorts, members of Congress even, including some Republicans, have stated that this particular president, what would be Donald Trump, and I want to make it clear, I didn't vote for Donald Trump. I've only voted for a handful of Republicans in my whole life. I voted for way more Democrats throughout my life than I've ever had Republicans. So I want to make that perfectly clear. But fair is fair, what is right, and the truth is the truth. And I am going to put down all sides, all parties. I don't care if you're a conservative or a liberal Democrat. If you're in the wrong, I'm going to tell it to you. Just like recently, before I continue on with this Donald Trump factor of Russia collusion delusion, as I refer to it, ultimately, well, let's just go with that. Let's just stick to the task here. I don't want to digress too much. These individuals that went after the president stated that he colluded with Russia to steal what would be the election last year. They worked that for 7 months straight, and then about a month ago, they said, oh no, it's now obstruction of justice. Then that didn't pan out, so what did it become then? He's mentally ill. 25th Amendment. Impeach! Impeach! They say. Look, I didn't hear a peep about Barack Obama being impeached when I was trying to impeach his tail end as a president over the last several years. So the way I look at it, and by the way, I didn't even hear Republicans calling for impeachment. That's the sad part. Just like recently, I told Republicans too, I said, it's funny how many of you people, so-called conservative patriots, bitched and complained. You had all these special events. There's this guy named Anthony, had this big old gun event in Yakima, and boy, oh boy, people just sat around and talk about what they would do and what they should do, woulda, coulda, shoulda. 2 years later, well, we got a Republican Congress, Republican Senate, Republican President, and where the hell are you at now? Not looking so patriotic, are you? And it's interesting because I even see on all sides, things are beginning to break down, people. Even on the, it don't matter if you're on the conservative or the liberal side. A lot of you people, even the Libertarian Party event, said that they were losing numbers of what would be active registrations. What does this show, people? What does this mean? Here, allow me to break this down. Your constituents, it doesn't matter if you're a Republican, it doesn't matter if you are Democrat, it doesn't matter if you're a Libertarian, Independent, or whatever, they're not very satisfied because they don't see a long-term variable that they can trust and believe in. Change you can believe in, that obviously fizzled out years ago. And here we are today. Now, Russia collusion delusion is nothing more than lies, fake news, propaganda, and BS. It's meant to manipulate you, the voter, and the people to turn you against this president. Well, I didn't vote for President Trump, but I'll tell you what, I don't like it when people make up lies about a man. I don't like it. It's not right. So I will defend him because I feel it's my duty. And it's too bad that more of my own constituents across Washington State didn't look after and defend me too, when some of you knew that I was not abusing a dog. But that's okay. You and your businesses and families are now, well, got a noose around your neck more than you know. And you're going to become very desperate, many of you will, for real representation and leadership. And many of those folks out there right now that are living the delusion, drugs or escapism or this or that, things are getting ready to fizzle out, and you're going to be forced to come to the table and discuss a lot of these variables over the months ahead. Remember when my forecast used to tell you years and years from now? No, now I get to tell you over the weeks and months ahead. Now, what's going on right now is simple as this. We have active members of the government trying to perform what they call a coup d'etat. That's right. They are trying to overthrow, literally, our government. Trying to overthrow a duly elected president. Lawfully elected president of the United States of America. That is illegal. That is illegal. Now, I'm glad to see President Trump and folks developing a special prosecution to go after Hillary Clinton, Loretta Lynch, and others. Podesta, Weiserman Schultz. This needs to happen. Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. And now you are going to see over the months ahead, folks. That's right. Over August and especially September, October, November, December, you are going to see the other side of the story. And I sure can't wait for many of my dear constituents, friends, opponents, and folks out there all across the world watching this show to be able to see the other side of the story. This is exciting. I've waited years and years. Actually, I've waited over a decade for this. So if I seem so ecstatic, like I just can't keep my words together, you know why. I'm very energized and I'm on the brink of major success and breakthroughs. God Almighty, thank God. So, and that's one thing too. Lately, people have noticed I've been talking about the Lord more. Well, I've always loved the Lord, but I've tried to be more secretive, or should I say, keep that stuff private. That's one of those things that, you know, kind of like dating or this or that. You don't really, you know, kiss and tell. You don't really want to, you know, tell all those fine issues, and it's nobody's business, really, quite frankly. But lately, I've seen such an ungodliness coming from many people in Washington State and all over. And so with so much darkness, bitterness, deceit, with so many people turning on themselves and each other, committing suicide, doing hard drugs. I mean, I see people picking, not just on each other, on yourselves. You're really hurting yourselves, people, more than you are anybody. So a lot of the stuff isn't working out. That's why so many people are depressed. I mean, I live just north of Seattle, 40 miles. Everybody around here was so lovey-dovey just 4 or 5 years ago. You walk up to a store, grocery store somewhere, they were grabbing the door for you and arguing for you to go through the door first. Now people are picking on each other. And it's not just conservative to liberals. Oh no, I'm talking within their own same party, within the own same household. I'm seeing marriages out there beginning to rock harder than an Ozzy Osbourne concert. That's right. Speaking of Ozzy and the guitarist at the beginning. So, pretty interesting. Pretty interesting. So, we have a witch hunt to take out this president. We have a coup d'etat. It's a very biased, fake news media that's telling you not just one side of the story, they're belligerently lying to you. That's right, they're telling you lies, folks. And you know, I mean, they fooled you before with Obama, many of you. And some of these people figure if they can fool you twice with 2 of those elections, well, hell, they can fool you 3 times with Russia collusion delusion, make you think you want Hillary Clinton. I mean, after they fool you 3 times, folks, I mean, Jesus, if I was one of these bad guys, I figured, hell, if we can fool you 3 times, we could probably pull off a scam 4, 5, 6, or 7. Hell, if you're going to be that dumb, no offense. It's time, people, to pull it together. It's time to be real. Some of these videos, some of my commentary, some of the stuff I discuss with many of these members, including some of political folks, even in the Libertarian Party, it's too much. Some of these people try to pretend they don't understand what I'm saying. Well, like I told a couple members lately, and I made it very clear. One of them tried to say, what'd she say? She said something about a tinfoil hat. Well, I took off my sunglasses as I was sitting on the couch enjoying a cold beverage on a summer day on this rooftop party building that we were at for this event. And I looked at her. I said, no. Wait a minute now. Look me in the eye and tell me, do you really, come on, do you honestly, really believe that? Tinfoil hat. And she did a double take and looked at me, and she knew that I knew that she knew better. And that's when she looked at me and said, Kari, that's what we love about you around here. And then she quickly, briskly left my presence as quickly as she could. That's reality. Reality is too much for many of you to handle. But let me tell you something about leadership. Your constituency wants a leader. They want guts. Why do they vote for Donald Trump? He has such a big mouth. He's politically incorrect. They say such bad things about him. So why did people vote for Donald Trump? Is it because everybody in this nation that's white is a bigot, racist, homophobic, xenophobic, sexist, and every other ist? he can come up with? No. It's because they're tired of politicians. They want a guy that's blunt, like me, like Donald Trump. Many of the people that would have voted for Bernie did vote and jumped ship and went to Trump instead because they felt he was an honest man. It's not even about the policies, half of them now. People want somebody real, somebody that's honest, somebody that's not scripted. Like, for instance, I have a few talking points and notes on a piece of paper, but I'm not reading from a damn script here, folks. I'm talking to you from my heart. And I hope you'll listen. Because any of you that's known me for the last 10 years knows I've only been wrong on a handful of times. Literally, I've only been wrong like 3 or 4 times about things I've said. And I run my mouth a lot. I've already mentioned 100 things in this forecast alone, and I've only been wrong 4 times ever. So, by their deeds and by the past, you shall know them. I'm credible here. So the president is finally starting to kick some butt. We're 7 months into his administration. I don't agree with all of his policies, but I think that he means well, and you have to give him credit. Everything he said he was going to do on that campaign trail, he's working on, and he's committed to doing. He's working his ass off till 1:30 in the morning. He hardly even sleeps. He sleeps 3-4 hours a night at most. Appreciate that, people. He means well. He cares about your families. He's a rich man that actually still has the ability to relate and give a darn about you. So, moving on from Donald Trump and whatnot. But very interesting, the ties and the connections between the liberal left, how they came up with one story to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next, to try to take me down, and they're doing the same thing to Donald Trump. Russia collusion, Russia collusion, Russia, Russia, Russia. That didn't work, so it became obstruction of justice, obstruction of justice. That didn't pan out. Then it became he's mentally ill, he's this, he's that, he's the other. I mean, come on. Now it's to the point where the special investigator is looking into his children and family and extended family and business ties going back 10, 15 years ago. See, when you're looking into that, you are going on a witch hunt. You're not really looking to prosecute a president that deserves to be prosecuted. It's called, let's find something, anything. We're going to get dirt on him and we're going to make him look bad one way or another. That is the mission of what would be Special Prosecutor Robert Mueller. At this point, he hasn't came up with jack shit. He has spent too many millions of your dollars hiring 16 attorneys, and it seems like 90% of them have donated. Is this funny? I follow the money. They're all Democrats. These are all people that are friends with and tied into the Democratic Party. He's finding a whole bunch of hitmen to join him to take out this president. So this is wrong. I'm going to stand up for my president. 17 intelligence agencies hoax that told you that Russia collusion was a factor. Well, here we go. Let's have a head intel chief let you know it's not 17. I guess it's now just 3. We'll catch you back after this break. Seeing is believing.
This on the 6th of January, there were 4 of us, meaning the directors of NSA, FBI, and CIA, and myself. That's all. And we explained who did the report. So how this narrative got out there about 17 components being involved, I don't know. But the report itself makes it clear that it was the 3 agencies plus the Office of Director of National Intelligence that put this intelligence community assessment together.
Are headed in terms of the efforts to unseat our president. It's very important to understand exactly who Robert Mueller, the special counsel, colloquially called a special prosecutor, is. But above all, it's important to understand that Mr. Mueller was appointed solely on the authority and the direction of acting Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, meaning he was not appointed either at the direction of the president nor at the direction of the president's Attorney General, former Senator Jeff Sessions. Sessions recused himself from the entire Russian matter, in my opinion, unwisely, and evidently to the consternation of the president, who was unaware that that recusal was coming. We'll look at Mr. Rosenstein in just a moment, but first let's look at Mr. Mueller. This fellow was appointed, as I say, by Rosenstein. Mr. Mueller was James Comey's immediate predecessor as the FBI director, and he was appointed to that position by George W. Bush when he replaced his deputy. That wasn't the first time Mr. Comey and Mr. Mueller's paths would cross. In fact, I think it would be fair to call them cronies. We now know, incredibly, that Mr. Mueller met with and coached Mr. Comey before his Senate testimony in recent days, in which he falsely accused the president of obstruction of justice. We also know, historically, that Mr. Mueller has been a hitman and executioner for both the Clintons and the Bushes, proving that he is a loyal soldier of the deep state and the neocons who have dominated both parties essentially for the last 30 years. It was only recently that I was reminded that it was Mr. Mueller who removed all of the anti-Islamic terrorism information from the FBI's training manuals. So he is politically correct and has been part and parcel of the efforts within both the Bush and Clinton administrations to lay down to radical Islam. It is not just a question of Mr. Mueller's intention. Now we know that he is actively hiring Obama-era appointees from the Justice Department to aid in his investigation of the president. What is there to investigate? The facts are known. Legal scholars across the spectrum have made it clear that there is no obstruction of justice. So what gives? It's very simple. Mr. Mueller is determined to bring a charge of obstruction against the president regardless of the facts and regardless of the fact that he has no case. Having failed with his friends at the NSA and the CIA and the others in the intelligence community to make a case for Russian collusion to assist Donald Trump, a scandal for which there is still not to this day an iota of evidence that would hold up in American court of law, we now conjure this phony obstruction as a triggering point for the zanies in the left wing of the Democratic Party, bolstered by Mr. Soros, to trigger the insurrection on the ground, to destabilize the government and seek to remove Donald Trump in the kind of frenzy we saw surrounding the fall of President Richard Nixon.
And if he's fired by Mr. Trump, or if he's attempted to be fired by Mr. Trump, I really hope that our members of Congress, our elected representatives, are going to stand up and say enough is enough, and stop making apologies and excuses for things that are happening that really flout, I think, our system of laws and government here.
When you say enough is enough, if he's fired, and he's the President of the United States, he could tell Rosenstein to fire him if he wants. But if he's fired, what would you want Congress to do?
First of all, I think it's the obligation of some executive branch officials to refuse to carry out some of these orders that, again, are inconsistent with what this country is all about. But I would just hope that this is not going to be a partisan issue, that Republicans, Democrats are going to see that the future of this country is at stake, and there needs to be some things done for the good of the future.